about that one summer. The one that really felt like the launching pad for everything, where the map just kind of unfolded in front of you. Nothing but possibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly where we're headed in today's deep dive. We're jumping straight into the summer of 1961.
Right after high school graduation.
Exactly. Through the eyes, the memories, of a young guy named Lee Livingston and his friend Dango.
And the lens we're using, it's excerpts from Lee Livingston's memoir, In the Rearview Mirror.
That's the one.
It's his look back, years later at that really formative time after they finished up at university school in Cleveland.
Precisely. And our goal today, really, especially because you flagged this one for us, is to unpack the most, insightful and, let's be honest, the most entertaining bits from Livingston's memories of this whole journey. You mentioned wanting to quickly get a solid feel for what really stood out that summer, the key experiences, so that's what we're aiming for.
Okay, so picture this. Two 18-year-olds just finished prep school in Cleveland. Yeah. And they make this completely spur-of-the-moment decision. Drive all the way to California.
Just like that.
Pretty much. In Livingston's car, a black and red 1951 Pontiac Star Chief convertible.
Nice car for the time.
Oh, yeah. Top down, radio playing loud.
Yeah.
It just screams youth and, total freedom.
It really does. And it wasn't just about, hitting the road. There's this great little observation Livingston puts in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Something he heard years later at a Cleveland Indians spring training game. Some old-timer said, I don't know how great America was a while back, but it sure as hell was a lot more friendly.
That's interesting.
And it feels like that sentiment kind of echoes through their trip, doesn't it? This feeling of a time maybe a bit more open.
It does seem that way. And what's wild is how completely unplanned it all was. They just went.
No itinerary, nothing.
Nope. Livingston describes the routine, basically swapping, driving, pulling over for quick cat naps, and fueling up on, beer, coffee, burgers, and candy bars.
The classic road trip diet.
Exactly. It's like the pure essence of a road trip. Total liberation.
They were really soaking it all in, that whole American road trip thing. Livingston even mentions Dango quoting a Burma Shave rhyme.
Oh, wow. Burma Shave. Takes you back.
Right. Those little roadside signs. It's a tiny detail, but it really puts you in 1961.
Definitely.
And he makes sure to talk about the car, the Star Chief's engine, this powerful L8.
Yeah.
Said it just ate up the miles.
Handled well, too.
Yeah, he says its long wheelbase and weight meant it just barreled down the straightaways and hugged every curve like a racer. Said daisies were the furthest things from their minds.
Sounds like they were having fun.
Yeah.
But that feeling of freedom, it often bumps up against reality, doesn't it?
Always does.
So they get to Sequoia National Park, these massive ancient trees all around them, incredible place.
Yeah.
And suddenly, Dango just says he wants to turn around. Wants to go home.
Whoa, really? Yeah. After driving all that way?
Yeah. It's this moment that really shows that tension, the romantic idea of freedom versus, the pull of home, of reality, something lots of people feel during big changes.
Absolutely. That's a very real moment. And Livingston points out how different they were personality-wise.
Best friends, but different.
Yeah, Dango seems maybe more impulsive, or maybe just showing his nerves more in that moment.
And Livingston.
Well, Livingston admits later in the book that he kind of felt the same pull to go back, but out loud. He tries to play it cool, typical 18-year-old.
Hey, don't show weakness.
Exactly. He basically tells Dango, hey, let's talk about it once you're on the safe side of this railing. They were up on Mora Rock, looking out.
So what do you think that little episode tells us about, male friendship at that age?
Good question. Maybe it speaks to that pressure, to seem tough, unwavering, even when you're feeling shaky.
Yeah, I could see that. Livingston probably felt admitting his own doubts would kind of ruin the image, right? Two guys fearlessly conquering the West.
Probably.
Yeah.
But it also shows they were close, That Dango actually said it, voiced that vulnerability, even if it passed quickly.
True, and Livingston's reaction, even if it seemed a bit dismissive, maybe it was his way of saying it's okay without actually saying it, a way to manage the anxiety.
Could be. And it's telling that Livingston admits, internally at least, that the fear of his father's reaction was a big part of why he kept pushing forward.
The parental factor still looms large even when you think you're free.
Exactly. Wanting independence, but still tied to those expectations.
So after that wobble, they have this very relatable experience at the employee dance at the rec center there.
Oh, yeah.
Livingston paints this funny picture, teenage energy, hormones, awkwardness. the whole deal.
I can picture it.
And Dango, apparently true to form, immediately zooms in on the younger, newer girls who just arrived.
Sounds like Dango.
Yeah.
That classic dynamic, right? One guy jumps right in.
And the other hangs back a bit. Yeah. Livingston mentions Dango dancing with this girl who barely reached his chest, giving Livingston this, cheapish grin over her head.
Funny. But then Livingston has his own moment, right? With a girl named Barb.
He does. He describes this really intense eye contact during a Roy Orbison song, which, for an 18-year-old who hadn't kissed anyone recently, it felt like a huge signal.
The power of Roy Orbison.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So next slow dance, they're together, and she's looking up at him, big blue eyes, the whole thing.
Okay. Sounds promising.
And it leads to this potential California weekend. Barb invites him down to Long Beach for a family thing, even says she's got a place for him to stay.
Wow. The ultimate summer dream unfolding right there. Sun, surf, maybe more.
He is totally on board, immediately starts mentally rearranging his work plans with their friend Joey Bursop back home.
Priorities.
Exactly. So they're driving down California Route 99, the Grapevine. He notes it was mostly 4 lanes even back then, making good time, until things take a sharp turn. They witness this car accident, a truck full of produce involved.
Oh, man.
And shortly after that, bam, pulled over by a farm couple who also saw the wreck.
Okay.
And suddenly, those beer cans they had open in the car become a very real potential problem.
Right. Forgot about the beer.
Livingston thinks fast, hides the cans. Probably saved them some serious trouble right there.
Quick thinking.
Yeah. And he manages to get to a phone, calls their friend Joey to arrange a pickup. Luckily, they weren't actually too far from the park entrance.
Close call. It's a good reminder, isn't it? Even on the most carefree trip, stuff can happen. Consequences.
Definitely. And those consequences start rolling in pretty quickly when Livingston calls home and gets his brother Jay on the phone.
Uh-oh. How did Dad take the news about the car?
Not well. The reaction was immediate. Livingston quotes him, "The car's junk. Put Jay on the phone. I'll deal with you when you get back here."
Oof. Classic angry dad.
Totally. And even though Jay's just relaying the instructions, Livingston notes, kind of wryly, how the sibling not in trouble always seems to get a little kick out of the other one's misfortune.
So true. This whole thing then leads Livingston into thinking more about Cleveland itself, right?
Yeah, he reflects on it, points out that, while the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra was world-class, the white part of Cleveland felt like it lacked a certain vibrancy compared to black Cleveland, anyway.
Interesting observation.
He even mentions Bob Hope. Hope was from Cleveland, co-owned the Indians baseball team, but still made jokes about the city.
Right.
So for white teenagers like them in the Heights, which was a richer suburban area, entertainment was kind of limited.
What do they do?
School dances, movies, maybe a country club party if you got invited. That was about it. So Livingston says it's really no surprise they turned to beer and kind of looked towards Black Cleveland for excitement, for the music and the vibe they weren't finding in their own circles.
Makes sense. Then we meet the two Susies. Their dates back home, Susie Bain and Susie Mason.
Right. And Dango's descriptions, well, they're very direct, really highlight the social scene.
What did he say?
Susie Bain had big eyes, and Susie Mason had big tits. That's Dango's summary.
Oh, I see.
But Livingston is quick to point out these were mostly platonic friendships, not serious dating.
Why not?
Well, there were pretty clear social rules in the Heights back then about dating and sex before college.
It really was a different time, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The understanding was basically everyone was heading off to college. Getting serious was kind of frowned upon, like it might mess up your future plans.
Right.
Livingston even mentions this scandal. A preppy guy got a preppy girl pregnant, and they basically just disappeared from the social scene. Vanished.
Wow. Really shows those conservative attitudes, the expectations around premarital sex and pregnancy in their world back then.
Definitely. So navigating all that, Livingston and Dango make another impulsive move, a bus trip to Las Vegas.
From California. Okay.
Yeah. And he paints this really vivid picture of the bus ride, all sorts of people, a real cross-section of California life. Definitely not the crowd they were used to back in the Heights.
Cool.
Older couples, soldiers, a Mexican family, even a couple of guys who looked pretty down on their luck. It was clearly an eye-opener for them compared to their, somewhat sheltered upbringing.
Must have been. So, Vegas. Did their luck change?
It took a very surprising turn, actually. After dinner at the Golden Horseshoe all-you-can-eat prime rib, Livingston notes Dango went back 3 times.
Yeah, sure.
Livingston puts some quarters in a slot machine and hits a jackpot, wins $600.
$600. in 1961. That's huge for an 18-year-old.
Massive. He said the bells went off, quarters pouring out, felt like he'd robbed a bank. And apparently, nobody ever asked him how old he was.
Huh. Beginner's luck.
Maybe. So suddenly he's got all this cash and casino chips. Flying back to Cleveland starts looking like a real possibility, and his attention turns to the blackjack tables.
Ah, the gambler emerges. But their Vegas trip took a less glamorous turn too, right? With that show.
Oh, yeah. They decide to see the Lido de Paris show at the Stardust. They have these ideas about seeing beautiful naked women.
Uh-huh. Teenage boys' expectations.
Exactly. And the reality didn't quite match up. What do you think they were actually expecting, given where they came from?
Probably something shaped by movies, right?
Hmm.
The Rat Pack vibe, dazzling, maybe a bit naughty, but still sophisticated. Coming from the Heights, they were likely pretty naive about what a Vegas show really was.
I think so, because the reality, heavily made-up showgirls just sort of prancing and posing. Livingston said the title should have been Beautiful Naked Female Breasts.
Uh-huh. Not quite the allure they imagined.
Not at all. He described them as statuesque, sequined outfits, but mostly just standing around, definitely anticlimactic.
So they were disappointed.
Pretty clearly. He said the only act that was even slightly teasing was some dancer with huge white feathers who didn't actually reveal anything. After a couple of expensive beers, they just walked back to their motel kind of laughing about it, but definitely underwhelmed.
And it's in that mood that Livingston mentions seeing Blake Starr at the Southchitty.
Right. Which was a totally different experience, a complete contrast to the Lido.
How so?
Blake Starr, she was apparently the real deal. Came out in this Dale Levens type outfit, gradually took it off. Livingston says she was big in all the right places and really knew how to work the crowd, tease them.
Sounds more like what they were hoping for.
Definitely more authentic, less artificial. He even tells this story about some guy in their row who seemed to be having his own private reaction during her naked dance.
Oh my. A memorable moment, I guess.
Memorable and slightly awkward, yeah. So after Vegas, they try to leave town, attempt hitchhiking.
How'd that go?
A friendly girl in a car actually warns them against it, says people lose all their money in Vegas and get desperate, so hitchhiking isn't really a thing there.
Good advice. Did they listen?
Well, they did manage to get a ride eventually, a guy who just picked up his girlfriend, Penny. He takes them as far as a smaller casino outside town, thinking they'll have better luck catching a ride from there.
Makes sense.
Their next ride takes them towards Arizona. The driver kind of jokes about their plan to get all the way back to Ohio, but he gives them a lift anyway, dropping them near another small casino.
So they're making progress slowly.
And Livingston admits here he's starting to feel a bit anxious, nervous about getting arrested in Arizona. He remembers getting into minor trouble back in the Heights, where the police were usually pretty lenient with kids like them.
Oh, but Arizona might be different.
Exactly. He's aware the Highway Patrol has a tougher reputation. Probably seen shows like Highway Patrol with Roderick Crawford.
Right, that old show.
It's a sign they're realizing the world is bigger and maybe less forgiving than their suburban bubble. He looks back later and thinks about how reckless they were, being open beers in the car, speeding, and he figures they were just lucky, partly because there were simply fewer cars and fewer police on the roads back then compared to later years.
Could be true, but then impatience gets the better of them.
It does. They make a pretty risky call in Arizona. Hop a freight train.
Whoa. Seriously.
Seriously. Livingston calls his mom, but totally downplays where they are and what they're doing. You know, the classic teenage, don't worry mom move.
Of course.
While trying to grab some dinner before finding a train, they're at this market and see this kind of weird scene, an older guy meticulously reading Vogue magazine and spitting into a spittoon.
Huh. Another one of those random, vivid details Livingston remembers.
He's great at capturing those moments, but
Yeah.
the freight train itself, not exactly the romantic adventure they might have imagined.
How so?
Well, they find a boxcar that's partly open, but when they look inside, there's already someone in there, and Livingston says the smell alone was enough to warn them off. Unsettling.
Yikes. Okay, not so romantic. And there's a kind of uneasy feeling, this brush with something a bit darker. It wasn't the first time Livingston saw that side of Dango, right? He mentions a party back in Cleveland.
Yeah, a flashback. Dango gets into this really violent fight. Livingston actually has to physically pull him off the other guy.
Whoa, that's intense. A big contrast to the carefree road trip vibe.
Totally. And afterwards, Dango just breaks down, crying, asking why his mother doesn't love him. It's incredibly raw, vulnerable, Shows there was a lot going on under the surface for Dango.
Sounds like it.
And Livingston reflects on that relationship between Dango and his mother, Elaine. He remembers her making critical comments, comparing Dango unfavorably to Livingston himself.
Ouch, that's rough.
Really rough. And ironically, Livingston says he often wished he had Dango's outward confidence, even while seeing this vulnerability.
It's complicated. Then we get another flashback, right, to university school, to understand their rebellious side.
Yeah, the stupid endeavor, as Livingston calls it. They published this satirical poem in the school newspaper.
What happened?
It got them suspended, almost expelled. It just escalated somehow into this huge school-wide scandal.
Wow. Just goes to show, again, that kind of privileged but maybe somewhat constrained world they came from, where a prank could blow up like that.
Exactly. So, back on the road trip timeline, they're hitchhiking again, this time through New Mexico. End up in a diner.
Another diner encounter.
Yep. The waitress, other customers, they're all kind of amused by the freight train story. They start sharing stories about some local railway worker named Perry Carter. There's this sense of connection, community, even with strangers. It's a recurring theme.
Seems like it. They met a lot of interesting people.
They really did. And then there's this surprisingly prescient conversation with a young guy named Steve.
Oh, yeah. About what?
They're talking about the Korean War armistice, and somehow it leads to Steve mentioning Green Berets being in Laos and Vietnam.
In 1961.
Yeah. It's just this casual mention, but looking back, it's this little hint of the massive conflict brewing in Southeast Asia, something most Americans weren't really aware of yet.
That's chilling, actually.
Yeah.
Shows how much the world was changing right under the surface while they were just focused on their own adventure.
Exactly. And speaking of risk-taking, this prompts another flashback to Dango and his friend Big John Quirk back in Cleveland.
What were they up to?
They had this incredibly dangerous habit, drinking beer while sitting on top of radio towers in the suburbs.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Radio towers.
Dead serious. Livingston says he went with them once, climbed nearly 200 feet up, hanging on with one arm, holding his beer with the other.
Oh my God.
He quickly decided, yeah, that's not for him.
I don't blame it. Did they ever get caught?
They did, eventually. One snowy winter weekend, they packed beer and snurm in newspaper bags, climbed this icy tower in a place called Brook Park.
Right, and the police showed up.
Yep. Lights flashing below. They were sure they were busted, going to jail. But the cop who got them down, he recognized them. Saw they were boys from the Heights.
That again.
Yeah, so he basically just gave them a stern warning and let them go. Another example of those social dynamics, maybe getting a bit of leniency because of where they were from.
Interesting. Okay, so back to the main trip. Their travels then lead them to meet Lon and Noanna.
Right. This couple involved in some pretty unconventional stuff, like wildcatting for oil.
Wildcatting, okay.
Yeah, and Lon, he's got quite the backstory. Includes time in prison, a near-death experience, a colorful character.
Sounds like it.
Uh-huh.
And Noanna.
She seems like the steadying influence, kind of steering Lon towards more stable businesses, like investing in a motorcycle dealership.
Motorcycles.
Yep. And as soon as Dango hears about it, he declares he's getting a Triumph motorcycle next year. Just like that.
Another impulsive Dango decision.
Totally. And Lon's business ventures keep evolving. He starts selling Honda motorcycles, eventually owns an assembly shop.
So Lee and Dango end up traveling with them.
For a while, yeah. They get a long ride in Lon and Noanna's Cadillac, heading towards Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Well, they stop in Elk City, Oklahoma, and Livingston, feeling maybe a bit awkward, asks Lon and Noanna if they're actually married.
Bold question for an 18-year-old.
Right. And Lon launches into this long, rambling, but kind of unique philosophy about business, relationships, life in America. Livingston says it was different, but made a weird kind of sense, at least for Lon.
Ah.
And then comes this surprising moment. Livingston glances in the rearview mirror
Yeah?
and sees Noanna resting her head on Dango's lap in the back seat.
Whoa. Okay.
Ah.
That's unexpected.
Definitely unsettling for young Livingston. And it prompts him to think more seriously, maybe more maturely, about sex and relationships.
How so?
He reflects back on their earlier experiences, junior high fumbling, then high school, where he says sex and beer became the two primary weekend preoccupations.
Sounds about right for high school.
Yeah. And he remembers these frustrating times with girls where he tried to be the nice guy, but it just seemed to backfire or be misinterpreted.
Ah, the eternal struggle.
Right. There's also this kind of funny, kind of sad story about them trying to visit what they thought was a whorehouse in Canton, Ohio once.
How'd that go?
Total bust. He remembers it being cold, kind of scary, and definitely not appealing at all. They basically ran away.
Not quite the sophisticated experience they imagined.
Not even close. And looking back at all this, Livingston realizes something important.
What's that?
That neither he nor Dango were remotely prepared for the massive shifts in sexual attitudes, the whole sexual revolution that was literally just around the corner in the later 60s.
Good point. They were still operating under those old rules.
Exactly. And that point gets kind of driven home when Lon, totally casually, mentions he bought his fancy Cadillac with profits from what he calls the greatest porno book deal ever.
Wow. Okay. Worlds colliding there.
Definitely. And then there's this moment of youthful certainty. Livingston and Dango agree, absolutely, they won't get married young. No way.
Which is funny because...
Because ironically, Livingston notes they were both married by the time they were 25.
Huh. The best laid plans.
Right. Then they catch another ride, this time with a guy named Chuck. He's got this Chevy with custom leather seats.
Fancy.
Yeah. And Livingston, he's always tracking their progress, calculating how much further they have to go to get back to Cleveland. But then he has this really weird, vivid dream.
A dream.
Yeah, about flying over the Arizona desert, but on a railroad flat car. Just this strange, surreal image popping up amidst the reality of the road trip.
Brains do weird things when you're tired and traveling.
Totally. And he also reflects, around this time in the narrative, how his friendship with Dango started to drift a bit once they actually got back to Cleveland.
Oh, yeah? How so?
It wasn't like a big fight or anything, just natural maybe.
Yeah.
They started pursuing different interests, getting ready for college. Their paths just began to diverge.
Happens all the time after high school.
Yeah. So back on the road, they actually run into Chuck again, the guy with the Chevy.
Really small world.
This time he's driving a panel truck. They all stop at a truck stop diner in Missouri.
Another diner.
And they meet this really friendly waitress, Riola. And amazingly, she has connections to Cleveland, even knows the neighborhood where Livingston's mother grew up.
Wow. Those unexpected connections again. It's wild how often that happens on a trip like this.
It really is. But then things get dangerous again. Chuck, the driver,
Yeah.
he falls asleep at the wheel while driving.
Oh no. What happened?
Dango grabs the wheel, tries to control the car, but ends up veering off the interstate and sideswiping a power pole.
Jeez. Are they? Okay.
Sounds like they were shaken up, but okay. But the car's damaged. It's a moment where their luck really seemed like it might have run out.
Definitely. What do they do?
Well, right when they need help, they get it. From a really unexpected source. Two very large black men, AJ and Jaren, pull over.
To help them.
Yeah. Just stop and offer to help them with the damaged tire. An amazing act of kindness, especially considering the time.
That really is something.
And despite the situation, this kind of humorous, friendly vibe develops between the four of them. They end up riding with AJ and Jara in their old Plymouth, which, get this, also has a flat tire to find a gas station.
You can't make this stuff up. An adventure within an adventure.
Totally. They finally make it to a Sohio station, meet the attendant, Abe.
And Abe helps them out.
He does. What starts as just fixing the tires turns into this impromptu tire-changing party. Livingston describes it as this really heartwarming moment of strangers just coming together, helping each other, laughing about it all.
That's a great story, the kindness of strangers.
It really stands out. So finally, tires fixed. Livingston takes over driving for the last stretch back to Cleveland.
The home stretch.
Yeah. And as he's driving, he's reflecting, realizing more and more that his own future probably isn't in Cleveland, that he's headed somewhere else.
A big realization to have on the way home.
Mm-hmm. He also notes that after this trip, his contact with Dango became pretty limited over the next few years. Mostly just occasional phone calls, a few postcards.
He shares messages.
Yeah, just brief, kind of cryptic notes like, still alive, working steel mill, hot, or got the Triumph, let's ride. Stuff like that.
Keeping it brief.
Very. So jump forward a few years. Livingston comes back to Cleveland in 1966, reconnects with Dango.
How's that reunion?
Pretty good, it seems. Livingston introduces his girlfriend, Dean Sullivan, who he ends up marrying. And apparently, she and Dango hit it off immediately.
That's nice.
Yeah. They go to a party, and there's this general feeling that, okay, everyone's grown up a bit now. Livingston remembers seeing a girl there, Karen Fielder. And this prompts Dango to share something really personal.
About Karen.
Yeah. He tells Livingston about their past relationship, how much they were in love, things they shared, and then that she got pregnant.
Oh, wow. Back then.
Yeah. and the incredibly difficult decision they made to have an abortion. Dango gets really emotional telling the story.
I can imagine. That must have been deeply painful.
Livingston says it was one of the very few times he ever saw Dango cry. It reveals this huge, significant, painful chapter in Dango's past that maybe Livingston hadn't fully understood before.
Definitely adds another layer to Dango's character, his earlier outburst about his mother. It all starts to connect.
It does. They also talk about what's next after graduation. Dango's decided to join the Army Reserve's Officer Candidate School, OCS.
Okay. And Livingston.
He's thinking about joining the Army Reserve too, maybe through a connection his brother has. Different paths emerging again.
Seems like it. So how do they finally part ways?
Their final goodbye before Livingston leaves Cleveland again is, well, Livingston describes it as awkward.
Awkward how?
Like a brief, almost hesitant hug. Dango says, "You invite me to the wedding, I'll be there." And then he just hops on his Triumph motorcycle and speeds off. Very Dango.
Quick exit. Did he go to the wedding?
No, he didn't end up making it. And, as Livingston mentioned, they both ended up marrying other people. Looking back years later, Livingston reflects on it all. He feels he has a better perspective now, gained with age. He reassesses Dango's life, realizes that Dango was loved, maybe in ways Livingston didn't see at the time.
That kind of hindsight is powerful.
It is. He shares another memory, this one from childhood, them standing up together against some bullies, just illustrating that deep bond they shared way back when.
A reminder of what they were to each other.
Exactly, and he really regrets not taking any pictures on that 61 road trip. Says the only photos that survive are from their old university school yearbook.
That's a shame. But the memories are vivid.
Extremely. He talks about keeping a map from the trip, a WSST map, for years. It was marked up with their route, notes about people they met, a real record of the journey.
Did he keep it?
No, he eventually threw it out years later. And now, he really wishes he still had it, that physical piece of that pivotal time.
I get that. Maps can hold so much memory.
They really can. He concludes, basically, that the 1961 road trip was this incredibly intense, defining experience. It marked the real end of their adolescence, and it all happened against the backdrop of an America that was changing really, really fast.
So, yeah, looking back at Livingston and Dango's summer of 61,
Yeah,
you really see those classic elements of being young, don't you?
absolutely. The impulsiveness, that powerful urge for freedom.
And those unexpected lessons. Things you learn from chance encounters, from challenges you just didn't see coming. The kindness of strangers, too.
Definitely. This deep dive into Livingston's memoir, it gives such an insightful glimpse into that specific time, a really significant personal journey. You see the self-discovery, the messy parts of friendship, all playing out while America itself was shifting.
Okay, so that brings us to our final thought for you listening. Thinking about Lee Livingston's journey, what maps do you carry from your own formative times?
Yeah, maybe literal maps from trips or just those metaphorical maps that kind of guide your life now.
What do those maps reveal about the path you've taken? Maybe think about the lasting impact of moments that seemed fleeting at the time.
Or those unexpected connections, the people who pop up and change things, just like they did for Lee and Dango all those years ago.
Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.